little bit about the 9.3 visibility in the licensing. So when and if you receive the 9.3 licensing, you'll need the 9.3 updates as well, which should be published soon. One of the biggest hotfix items that was in the last month that was worth noting is the workflow. There's a specific workflow fix. I talked to our support director and just asked, what's the biggest thing we've dealt with in the last month? And he said, well, the biggest issue is a specific hotfix, and that's the exact one. Now, keep in mind this slide deck will be available to you, so you don't have to scribble this down if you don't want to. We'll email this out to everybody. But this is a good hotfix just to keep track. It solves a problem with the skipping for each value in workflow and having to republish existing workflows that include a find entries activity and could not load file assembly system, well, as you can see there. So that solves 3 of the issues with workflow, and just a good thing to keep in mind. Okay, other things to keep in mind is when you are upgrading from Forms 9.1 to 9.2, if you're currently a 9.1 user, it's really important to back up your forms because our support director has noticed that when upgrading to 9.2, it loses the logo and the theme sometimes. So if you have a really great theme you've built out, a really great header or logo in your forms, just make sure you back that up because we've seen a couple of customers lose their formatting when doing that upgrade. So that's really important. And the other thing to mention, I guess, that we've run into a few times in the last month is some minor network changes that occurred with customer systems. One important notice was just to remind our users that network changes do impact Laserfiche, and you should always just plan ahead with that and let us know or give us a call so we can just double check and test it with you to make sure you don't have any interruptions. Okay, so moving ahead into our Records Management Edition conversation. How many users in here have records management and do records retention with Laserfiche? Okay, excellent. Maybe about half of you. Excellent. So what we're going to look at today is, first of all, just a quick review on what records management is for those of you that don't know what it is, and then we're going to look at a great way to set up reporting and an approval process for your departments if you're looking to seek approval to destroy records. Currently, Laserfiche is set up that you define a records manager. It's the way that Records Management Edition works. And the records manager will typically go in and say, okay, these records are ready for destruction, they've met all the criteria, I'm going to go and destroy it. What we're going to see today is a way that you can send out a notice, a report, essentially, through email to the users that have records that would be affected. And they can log in and approve those records to be destroyed prior to the records manager doing that. So essentially getting feedback from your department heads. How many people have issues with destroying records because department heads don't want to get rid of them? Or users? Yeah? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this gives you that capability of saying, okay, well, here's the list, here's what's ready to go, and get some feedback. So quick review on records management. For those of you that don't have it, or maybe you have it but you don't use it, or you're not somebody who uses it, records management is all built around Laserfiche's Department of Defense 5015.2 certification with records management. So that means that Laserfiche has a number of different features, but most importantly, you can set the record retention schedule on different document types. So in the state of Oregon, we can actually load the record retention schedule directly into Laserfiche for all of your different document types that are defined by the state. And then you might have different policies on particular documents at your organization. Of course, you can set those individually. It also supports what's called time and then time and event based retention. So it could be something like we have to retain these documents for 10 years from the execution of the document. Or it might be we have to retain records 5 years after the termination of the employee. So time and then time and event based retention. So we can configure all of those. Now what does that look like to the user in the system? It looks like this. We've got records management over here for the records manager view, and that's by document type, because document types are the ones that define how long we keep records. But users in the system, they want to see different document types commingled, right? They want to see an employee file that has all different types of documents because it's all about that one employee. So the document view is different than the records view. And in the records management system, we have a retention schedule set on the document, or excuse me, the record type. So if it's an employee file or a specific record within an employee file, we'll set the record retention on that. And again, then they're commingled over here on the right-hand side. Next, what we can do is set a code. So I've got my little arrows here kind of pointing out the many different points I'll talk about, but I'll just kind of work my way down. We can set a code. So if we have a standard record retention type, and we have a code associated with that at the state level, we can insert that, some description, and designate the records that are permanent. So you can actually define records that are permanent within your system. And the only way to get your records not to be permanent in Laserfiche, does anybody know that little, I'm not going to call it a trick, but that process? No? If you have documents that are permanent in the system, the only way to make them unpermanent is to export out the volume and then re-import the volume as a new volume. So the volume is essentially permanent with those records until you export it out. Next thing is we do have the ability to set the record series type right here, as well as the time and the cycle. So if we're going to do cutoff every single year or every month or every quarter to begin retention on those records, we can set all of those different configurations. We can also set what the final disposition is, whether we're going to send those records through a session to Iron Mountain, so the possession of the records are going somewhere, or are we going to destroy them. We're able to set all of those settings per record series, and then we're able to designate the records as vital. Does anybody know what that means when you designate the records as vital, what that would do? Does anybody use that function? I'd love to know if anybody uses that. No? Okay. Somebody out there in the internet probably does. So designating the records as vital means that they'll come up for review on a regular schedule. I'm always looking for customers that use that function. But so that would designate a review cycle, for example, every month, that you need to review those records on a regular basis, every month or every quarter, annually. It's a feature required for the Department of Defense certification, so always looking for more uses of that. Okay, so moving on. We're going to do a demonstration of this and take a look at the Records Management Edition. Do you have any comments out there from the internet?
No, not so far.
Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and switch over to taking a look. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at our records management functionality in the system. And what's interesting about this is you'll see we have an employee records here. We have a number of different employee records within the system. And Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, and somehow Justin Steen stuck in there. He's one of our consultants. He's wishing he was in that list. So what we're going to take a look at is we've got specific records within the system, and we want to see documents and records that are eligible for destruction. So what we can do with that is we would be able to either conduct a basic search through here, and we'd be able to say, show me all the records that are ready for disposition through destruction, or they're ready for transfer, that they're eligible. And how we get there is through the records management search. Now that's a basic standard search in Laserfiche. It's not automatic. It just runs manually within the system as a user decides that they're ready to run that search. We can also save those. Oops, we can load from our save search. So eligible for destruction, for example, any files that are currently in legal hold, and then records approved for destruction. So we have 3 different searches. So we have one document currently eligible and approved for destruction. And how we've done that is you can see all the metadata over here on the right-hand side. We have a tag over here, and this is one method. So just one method to solve a problem, a use case that a customer would have. What we have over here is we're using tags. So consider this as an option for your records management functionality. What we did is we sent out a workflow notifying the users that have records that will be affected. I said, here's what documents or records we have available for destruction. We're going to wait until you approve those. So they log in, and we'll take a look at this. But they log in, and they're able to just click right here on Approved for Destruction, Admin, Approved for Destruction Legal, Approved for Destruction Manager. They'll only see their applicable tag. But they log in, when they select that, that criteria allows me to go through destruction for that record. It lets me know as a records manager, those are all completed. So that's been sent out for a workflow route. And how that's done is through a business process. How we send out this email notification to all of our users is through a simple business process. So we can send out, for example, right here, a records eligibility search. It runs that, and it goes ahead and it sends that out to all of my users. So does anybody use business processes in here? No? Okay. So business processes are essentially workflow with a button, a custom button in Laserfiche. And those can look like anything you would want. They could be a custom button, or it could be one of these business process buttons. So what we did effectively is run a workflow search on the back end that said, let me look through all of my records in the system and then send out an email notifying the users that they now have records that need to be reviewed. And I'm just going to, let's see if I have that PowerPoint. No, pull that up my email. All right, I'm a little afraid my email might blow up, but we'll open that particular email up. Just want to show you that one got sent out to me, notifying me that I have records to review. Just take a second here. All right, well, while we're waiting for my email to open, so we can take a look as well at our approval process down below. And if you look at this tree over here, you'll notice that we have the records folders, the bundles right up here on the top. So those are the actual records. And when the users receive the email notice, which I'll show you here once it downloads the email, is they get taken with a link to the document sets that are eligible. You can see this, the records destruction approval process. So they get taken to their exact folder that they need to review. The administrator needs to review this particular file and these other three, and they can look through them and say, okay, yes, that one about Tom Brady and how to open a coconut, good to go. And all they need to do is just say, all right, click, done, and that allows us to go ahead and send that out. We can also do that in mass too. So we could select multiple records, and we could say, okay, I want to select all of these and apply a tag of approval. This is for the legal office to be able to say, yes, we approve, that's good to go for destruction. And you could do that all at once. Here's what the email looks like, by the way, when an email is sent out. So we launch that, as a records manager, we launch that notice out to our users, and what it's going to do is run a search and say, Tom Brady's employment document, performance review, his tax documents, oh, and Aaron Rodgers' PCR, or personnel change request. Can't imagine what he wants to be changed to, but they're all in there, and this is the link right here. So they just click on this link, and that takes them right back to that folder where they can click through and approve records. So what that does for you, again, is it allows your users to, allows your records manager to efficiently send out the records to the users that are affected. They can review and give their approval. Can anybody see that working in the real world? Does anybody see a use for that? You having issues with that? Okay. Anybody want to talk about that? Questions?
What happens if they don't approve it?
Then it would sit in the folder that looks like this. They would sit here, and what we could do is set a timer and say, please go and review these records, and we could just keep pestering them. But ultimately, if they have to, as part of your policy, approve those, then they'll just sit there and wait. Any other questions or ideas? Yes?
Hi, we have international students, and they have documents that are constantly expiring, with visas and things like that, but we don't know how to notify them when things are about to expire, but they didn't have laser information. Would there be a way to let them know when this is like that?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm just going to reiterate that so everyone can hear it. So the question is, students exist that have visas and travel documents or documents that are going to expire, and you'd like to be able to notify them that they're going to expire, but they're not necessarily a Laserfiche user, because the students aren't obviously in your back-end system, right? So yeah, great way to do that is as long as you have an email address for that student. And we're going to actually look at a really neat feature very similar to this with contract management. I think it's this afternoon as part of our session this afternoon. So when contracts expire, which would be similar to your visas, as long as there's an expiration date, and what we're going to show today is the calculator, the date calculator, so that it can calculate out 2 years or 5 years or 30 days or whatever that is. Then that can send out an email notice to whomever, and it can just be simply you have an expiring document and then a table list of what those are. That would be a very simple thing to set up. Now what you'd need is the email address for that student, or it would have to be in a database somewhere. So Laserfiche workflow and records management can conduct a lookup. So if we say, we know that that visa is expiring, we want to know who to send it to, we would at least just need to know, here's the visa number or the student number, then we'll look up into Banner. Okay, excellent. So if any of you have Banner out there, we're talking about that. Look up into Banner and do essentially a cross-reference email, and then up to the user. Yes, sir.
So all these emails that this system is sending out, is there any logs in here that tells you who the emails are actually being sent to?
There is not, because the email is all SMTP. And sorry, let me reiterate that question. All the emails that are being sent out is Laserfiche logging any of those emails that are being sent out. There is not a log in Laserfiche because it sends it out through SMTP. So the workflow will send it out. Now, what we could do is we can choose to log on a document that a workflow was run through the business process. And it would look like this. So this actually gives me an opportunity to show that.
Does an audit trail watch those things?
Well, Audit Trail can tell you that it launched a process, like send out an email, but it can't actually log that particular email. You couldn't go find it, but yes, we could log that process executed in workflow. And we can do that right here as well. So if you take a look here at the business process information, this is going to show us right here that the administrator destruction approval process is what we're currently on. And it would show us a history of what was actually approved today or before, or that an email was sent out, all in this business process. And by the way, for users that maybe are kind of wondering what in the world does my screen look like, why does it look like this? I have it in preview mode. So if you don't typically use that, I just turn on the preview mode there, and it opens up a preview so I don't have to actually open the document first.
Could you can have more than one sender to that email.
Oh, sure. Yeah, you could have multiple senders to the emails.
Folder files. All emails get sent to a certain place where they can be logged in there.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. As far as emails being sent out in multiple email addresses, you just need to, again, be able to look that up. Multiple folders, multiple email addresses. Workflow is pretty flexible in that respect. These are all good questions. Good questions, good ideas. Anyone else coming up with any other uses for records management? Yes, sir.
Just a question on that. Instead of just a link, is it possible to send out the document itself? In the case of seeing the visa or something like that, the end user is never going to be able to get back into the system to see the key information that's being discussed. Can you have the document sent to those users?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Good question. Can we have the document sent out instead of just a link? Certainly. So we could send out to going back to the student example, we could certainly send out a copy. Here's a copy of your visa. It's expiring on this date, this time. Make sure to get a new one back to us, or the renewal or whatever it would be. Get that back to us in a timely fashion. That could all be sent out, and you can do that in batch mode. This could be the exact same thing. So you saw where I clicked on this business process right here. this is going to go ahead and send out another email blast to all the users that have eligible documents. And I'll get another one that looks just like this coming in. So we could send that out to multiple users or the whole, every single student all in one blast if you wanted to do that. And another thing that's important to note is that this sends out a link. So that's going to require a user to log into Laserfiche web access, the browser, to access that particular document. We could have done an attachment, but we could also do a link back to Laserfiche with the thick client. And that looks like it sends a little tiny file that's not even 1 kilobyte in size. But that requires the user to log back into Laserfiche to access those documents. So the reason that that's important or useful is that you may not want to send documents around in your email. If they're very confidential documents, you may want to have users authenticate back to the Laserfiche system, but they get an email notice saying, here's a link back to it. That's the reason behind that.
I got a question from the webinar.
Excellent.
Are the documents identified for destruction automatically deleted, or is this done after the approval of a department head?
The documents and records would still have to go through destruction in Laserfiche. So they would not be able to be just automatically deleted after the administrator, legal, and manager approve it. They would still have to be done by the records manager. So the records manager would get the notice and say, okay, these are all ready now for destruction, and they can do their eligibility search. Right here, approved for destruction manager, or all. And let's see, admin, legal, all. There we go. And from here, a records manager could log in and then go through the records management actions, which in this case is destroy. So this is the only record that's been approved by all 3 of those departments and is also eligible for destruction through your records retention system. So the user just clicks on destroy, clicks yes, and Tom Brady's employment agreement is gone. Yeah. We thought of a lot of different funny puns. Sorry for any of our users that are out there in Boston. That's we're ragging on Tom Brady just a little bit. Anyway, so that's the entire process right there from a records management perspective. Now, taking it a couple steps further, going back to what else can you do with records management? How can you take this further? Because a lot of people that we work with, we implement the basics, which is records management per record series that each state requires, or each city has adopted the state retention. But we don't go too much further than that sometimes, because that's the basic setup that everybody wants. But we can do quite a bit more. So we've had a number of users that have said, we want to store paper records, or we've got physical objects like microfilm cassettes, and we want to be able to just keep track of that as a record in Laserfiche, and we are going to get rid of those cassettes at some point and those physical objects and records, paper records, but we want to know that they're in Laserfiche. So one of the ideal solutions is to use Laserfiche Forms. So Laserfiche Forms becomes an input option for a box, sending a record to the records retention hold or the vault. So they can fill out right here, as well as submit a request in Forms, and that can actually generate a barcode cover page. So if you're barcoding your record boxes before you put them down in the vault or you send them off to Iron Mountain, it can actually do that. But we went so far last month as to work with a client to integrate that with Iron Mountain software. So it's at least investigate. It's not completely done, but investigate that. And this is what the records submission form looks like in Laserfiche. Is you're able to fill in specific documents, a file number, a box number, any other indexing that you want about those paper records, and you submit that into Laserfiche Forms, and the records manager has a record of it, and it's also in Laserfiche. The same thing goes for a request form. So a user might say, well, I want to be able to have access to this particular employee file, and it's only in paper, and it's really confidential, so the records manager keeps a really tight lock on it. They can submit a request for that, and that'll go through Laserfiche Forms and get routed to the records manager as a task in their inbox. And from there, they can choose, do they want to permit that to be released or not, but they get it in through Laserfiche forms.
I have a question.
Yes?
With the request form, is there some way to keep a copy of that or have
Absolutely.
a copy of that kept somewhere?
Absolutely, good question. Can we keep a copy of the request form? And this is great for, this sort of deviates a little bit from our records management conversation, but this is also really great for public records requests. So if you're getting FOIA requests and things of that nature, this same type of form with more detail can be put on your website. And when that is submitted, that can become a document in Laserfiche, as well as just metadata in a database like you're seeing here. So that record can drop down into a records request folder, and you'll have a document. And from there, you can also request signatures. So in this case, you see the box retrieval request. This would come into the inbox in this scenario of the recorder's inbox or the records manager's inbox, and they would see this request, and it would say, okay, yeah, we have a records request. Justin Steen is requesting this, and I'll go ahead and sign off on this, that we're going to release this copy. And you now have a record as well in Laserfiche of who has that document. Again, if it's physical, who has that? Or who's requested something as a FOIA request, and that'll drop down into your document system. So this is just a great way to configure Laserfiche forms to get, again, one more solution out of it. And this is Laserfiche forms with the inbox view. So additional resources for records management. We have this. If anybody would like a copy of the ultimate guide, Laserfiche gets very, they make it sound really exciting, right? Records management, the ultimate guide. You can download this on their website if you would like, or if you email me or us, we have a copy and we just email it right back to you as well. Okay, so improving security. Oh, actually, before we move on, any other questions about records management off the internet? Anyone else? Okay, excellent. All right, improving security in 3 steps. So we've got Bryce, Jesse here to do a presentation on improving security. And why don't you come on up, Bryce? Come on down.
Good morning. Nice to see everybody I haven't seen in a little while. And for those of you I haven't met before, hello. So I'm going to be walking through a little bit of kind of lesser known security kind of tips, 3 primary ones. Mainly those are have to do with volume security, security tags, and checking in on your access rights at the folder level. So just to preface that a little bit, how many of you have kind of security compliance requirements that you have to comply with? Just show of hands. Okay. And are those the documents that you just have in Laserfiche currently or planning to store in Laserfiche? I know a lot of organizations are tentative about storing some types of records electronically where they're not physically filed in a locked cabinet, mainly for reasons like HIPAA compliance, where there's a lot of strict standards to the security. Using some of these methods, it can assist with tracking and securing documents of that type. So I'm going to kind of go over each of these, and I'll take a look at the live system so that we can see a little bit of how those are configured. So with volumes, there's actually 3 major components I want to go over. One is the access rights of volumes, the encryption on volumes, and being able to use checksums on your volume files. I'll go into detail on each of those so that you can figure out what each of those are and how they're used. So with access rights, you may have already configured access rights for your volumes. to restrict users from actually being able to store to specific volumes or read the pages that are stored on a specific volume. And the main purposes for volume access rights is to do that, restricting the access, preventing users from modifying images or documents on there, deleting images on the volume can be restricted. And you can also restrict being able to create documents in the volume. One of the main aspects to this as well is that there's default security configured on every volume when you first create it. And that starts off with the everyone group having access to the documents on that volume. So that's one thing to keep in mind as you create new volumes in your repository. Volume encryption is a different sort of security on the volumes, whereas volume access rights prevent users within the Laserfiche client from accessing the documents. The volume encryption allows you to prevent users from accessing the files on the back end of the system. So directly on the file system of your Windows server where you're storing all of these files in volumes, they're, by default, they're stored as you would see them. So a TIFF image or a Word document just stored in the volume. Administrators that have access to the server for management purposes or backup purposes have access to those files. They may not know which files are which because they're not named as you would expect in the volume. But for some types of files, that access doesn't fit the right, it doesn't comply with all the rules that are set up for some organizations.
Right, so we have a question when you have a chance.
Okay. So for one of the, the method to block that sort of access is to encrypt those back-end files. So what was the question?
Yeah, so Eric Jensen has a question that does a volume have to be taken offline to change volume access rights?
So for, with the volume access rights, you don't have to take your volumes offline or prevent users from accessing them. It's a simple change in the properties on the volume, so no need to prevent access while you're making changes. And the same goes for the encryption. When you initially set up the encryption, it can take some time to go through and encrypt all of those back-end files. So it's a little bit expected that some users may not be able to access some files during the encryption process. But in general, it shouldn't affect too much. So like I was going on about the volume encryption, it's file system level security to prevent viewing of files by administrators or the backup tools. When it backs up all of your files, they're on a backup tape as TIFF images that could be opened. So encrypting those files will change that so that they're encrypted and unable to be opened without being inside Laserfiche. So one note about this is it affects pages and electronic documents. So encrypting a volume doesn't actually encrypt the metadata or folder structure that users are seeing in Laserfiche. It's just the back-end files.
Question.
Yeah.
Is it encrypting the metadata on the back end? All those nifty little text files with OCR data and all that?
So is it encrypting the metadata files and other files in the volume? The text documents are encrypted. Mm-hmm. I'm not positive about the thumbnail files. Okay. But text files, since they do contain searchable text, those are encrypted as well. So the next component to volumes that I wanted to go over is volume checksums. So most of you, or some of you may not know what checksums are. Basically what they are is a generated value based on the content of a file that can then be referenced later to see if the file has changed. There's a lot of different algorithm used for that, but it doesn't really matter the algorithm itself. But it generates this, what's called a hash code for every single document in your volume. And this is for the document's integrity. So if a file on the back end changes or a Word document is modified, the checksum of that document will change. So having that checksum value stored immediately when you create a document will allow you to go validate and verify that checksum later against the document at the current time. So enabling checksums is simply just a property of the volume. In my little screenshot, you can see that it has a validate checksums, disable checksums. There would also be enable checksums if it wasn't already enabled on this. The validate checksums command, we can actually run that validation, and it'll give us a report of every document that doesn't match your checksum. In most cases, checksums shouldn't ever change, or your document shouldn't be being modified that would change the checksum. So those reports would let you see if things are being modified. One caveat about this is it's not available on encrypted volumes. The method used for generating those checksums, if the file is encrypted, it can't generate a checksum for the content of that file. So it's something that those two don't necessarily go together. And generally the compliance requirements for encryption, if you're encrypting it, you wouldn't have to worry about the file being modified because it's encrypted. So, question?
I was just wondering, under the checksum, so if someone had gone into the file and done a modification of its color and flipped it to black and white to make the file say smaller, that shows us.
So the question is, if we have a document that was color and converted to black and white to save space, would that show up in the validation report? If it's done through Laserfiche tools, then that updates the checksum. The checksums here are mostly if somebody were to modify the file, not through Laserfiche, but directly in the volume. Browse into the volume, find a TIFF file, open it in Photoshop, and modify some of the image, which is possible if you've got access to the back-end files. This checksum lets you know that that was changed. So,
question, is there any way to validate checksum on, let's say I know there's this one file, I just want to know about this, I don't want to run that on my whole database and wait however long it takes to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to do it on just that one file?
So the question is are we able to run a checksum validation on a single document or single page or small group of documents? The validate checksums is only at the volume level.
Okay.
So it runs that report on the volume. If you've got a very large number of documents, it's certainly suggested to break them down into maybe rollover volumes that aren't as big. And then you can run it on smaller chunks, and then you just have to look to see what volume that document is a part of.
So would you have to run it on the individual rollover volumes, or could you run it on the whole? Like I have one volume, and I got 20 some odd rollovers. Do I need to know the exact one it's in, or can I just run it on?
You know what? I'm not actually positive if you can run it on the parent volume of a rollover set. It's not something I tried. Most commands that you run on volumes can be run on the entire volume set, though. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was available there.
You got a question?
Oh, yeah.
Can it also run on SHA-1, or is it just the checksums?
It's using I think it's using MD5 for generating the hash codes. So it's not a selectable option, though.
Do you mind repeating that last question for the
simulcast? Sorry, the question was, are you able to use the SHA-5 method for generating that, or SHA-1, sorry. MD5 is the method it uses for generating those hash codes. Okay. So I'm just going to go into the administration console and just kind of look at a few of those volume properties that I discussed. So in our repository, I have just one volume that's a rollover volume with one physical volume that's a member of that. volume, the first one that I talked about was volume security, is accessible from the All Tasks menu on the context menu when I right-click on a volume. Or if I have that volume highlighted, I can select that from the toolbar as well for looking at the security on there. The security on volumes, as I mentioned, there's a default security that gets assigned. As you can see here, the everyone group and the admin group have permissions on this volume, and that's what the default security is. Nothing's been added or modified to here. But if we do want to make that change, it's as simple as removing the everyone group so not everybody has access, and then adding in the individual groups that we would like to grant access to those. With the rollover volumes, if we make this change on one of the actual physical volumes that are a part of this rollover set, it would only change it for that one volume. If I change it on the logical volume for this rollover set, it will change it for all new volumes that will be created, but it doesn't actually modify the existing volumes. So if ideally you want to set up security when you first set up your volumes so that it inherits onto everything, but if you do want to change your security on one, you'll have to go into each of those physical volumes and make the security change on them. This is set up this way so that older rollover volumes, you can actually restrict people from modifying files on those after after they've been rolled over to a new volume, restrict access to the old ones so that nobody can change anything on those either. When you're looking at your security on your volumes, you might notice on each of these physical rollover volumes that users don't have the create document permission. And that's actually by design. The rollover volumes don't actually need the create document security on these volumes for users to create documents there, because they actually tell it to create the document on the logical volume, and then the system determines where it should go. So don't be worried if you see that nobody has the create document permission on your rollover volumes. That's expected. If you do add it into each of those volumes, users will be able to select each of those sub-volumes individually to store documents to them, which might end up with old document or new documents on old volumes, which if you're using those in any sort of chronological manner would put things out of order.
Question. If someone were to do that, and let's say old volume was already at its file size limit, what would happen? Would it switch to a new?
The question is if somebody tried to store a document to one of these sub-volumes, if you granted them create documents permission, what would it do if that volume is full? It would give them a message and let them know that it's full, and not let them create the document there. They'd have to select a different volume.
Can you even specify a physical volume?
If you grant that create document security, you can actually, it'll show up in the list of volumes available for users to store documents onto. And that's the whole purpose for not having that create document. Now the volume encryption, when I right-click, I can select encrypt volume, and it actually lets me select from 3 different encryption methods or algorithms, AES 128 through 256. So that's the highest capability they have at the moment. I'm sure they'll be increasing that as time goes on. But we basically just select which of these methods you want, which is basically just how many bits it's using to actually encrypt the data. And then we pick a password, and it uses that to generate the encryption key. Question?
So as new documents are added into an encrypted volume, they get encrypted on the fly. How much of a hit is there performance-wise on your server? Add that.
So the question is how much of a performance hit is there when we are encrypting volume or documents on the fly as we're adding them? It's going to be dependent on your server resources about how much this affects performance, but I haven't seen too big of a hit on that.
And then the other side of that is as users request documents for viewing, they get unencrypted on the fly as well.
Yeah, it is doing all the encryption, decryption on the fly whenever a document is requested. So things may be slightly slower for the added benefit of the encryption.
Can you repeat that last question?
Well, that kind of.
Okay.
So when we select the password, you'll definitely want to keep track of that password. You don't need it on a regular basis, not even to actually decrypt the volume, but you will need that password if you detach your volume and put it somewhere else. When you attach that volume again, Laserfiche has to know the password to decrypt it again. So make sure you keep that password in a safe place because Laserfiche has no way of recovering the encryption. The CIA might have methods for decrypting all that, but I won't get into that.
And you'll also probably need to make a note of the algorithm you select too.
Yes, yeah, you would want to make a note of the algorithm selection as well as the password for the decryption.
So what about storage of the encryption password that it's using to decrypt? Is that fairly well stored away?
As far as where the password is stored in the system, I'm not sure where it stores that. I imagine it's in a database table somewhere that's obfuscated and encrypted. So I won't actually go through and encrypt the volume because I don't want to take the time to wait for that. The next option, though, and is actually pretty handy that it's not encrypted, is the enable checksums because I can't enable checksums on an encrypted volume. It has no real options for it. It just enables checksums and goes through and generates the hash code for each document in this volume. And it can take a fair amount of time, a similar amount of time as the encryption. And with a 470 megabyte volume size currently, it could probably take 10 minutes. So I won't worry about actually running the checksum. But it's available at the same place as the encrypt volume. Now there's one extra option that I didn't mention, that's the secure volume, which is kind of a subset of the encryption. And if you secure the volume, users will be required to enter a password every time they open one of those files. So it's kind of like the super security on the volume level. Secured volumes, however, have to be read-only. You won't be able to add documents to a secured volume. You can only read those. So that would be something that you enable after the volume has rolled over. So anybody have any questions about the volume kind of attributes and properties that I went over?
That last part you showed us about checksums. Let's say I'm an end user and I want somebody to prove to me that the document I put in last week hasn't been modified. Mm-hmm. How would you do that?
So when checksums are enabled, there will be, instead of enable checksums, there will be validate checksums, which will give us a dialog that shows us how many documents are in the volume, how many of them don't match, and how many of them, if they're missing, it'll show you that that page is missing out of the volume where it would expect it.
So that would only be available through the admin console. So essentially, we'd have to email that report to the end user and say, here's the report we ran that says nothing was modified.
Right, yeah. The validation of checksums is only available through the administration console, so it's not a user accessible task. So an administrator would run that validation report. And it'll actually give you a CSV file that you can download and then open up like an Excel and sort and make charts and do whatever you need to.
I had a request from our police department. They had some evidence photos. They wanted to make sure that nothing was ever tampered with, and they had me add a metadata field that was just the MD5 checksum, and it was computed before the document was added. And so if they wanted to validate that, they could pull down an individual document, use some external tool to compute the checksum, and then compare that to the metadata, and that was their assurance. So that would still be a useful thing for an end user to have.
Yes. Yeah, actually, I think I remember that actually, having the files, or the users requested this. Actually, that was some time ago with Laserfiche 7 probably, where uploading each of those evidence photos with a special tool generates a checksum that it stores in a metadata value that you can then use to compare that checksum later. And that was kind of before this functionality came into Laserfiche, so it wasn't there, but that's a good user interface for doing that.
Yeah. You figure to some degree if you encrypted, that may not be necessary because it's on mess with the file and break it entirely and it would just,
yes,
the file would not be there.
So on a checksum enabled volume, My options are validate checksums and disable checksums. When I run a validation, it runs a report and gives me the list of all of the information about each of those documents. So in this case, there was nothing on it, so there's nothing to report. If there was, it would have this download report button, which would give me that comment separated values file.
Question on that. On the checksums and also on the secured files, is there an audit trail of who would have accessed that with their passcode or made changes?
So the question is there an audit log for the checksums and encryption and that kind of task? And the answer is yes. Any administrative volume task is audited if you have that auditing enabled. Now, I believe you have to have the advanced audit trail edition. Starter and standard won't audit the administrative tasks, but advanced audit trail will. And that's what comes with the records management module. So if you've got records management, you've got advanced audit trails.
Hey, Bryce, I have another fun security question. Can you open up the volume dialog right there on the path? I was just curious, has anybody ever used an external removable volume? Have you ever done that before, removable? This is sort of a legacy thing from years ago, but especially I'm supposed to talk over here. But
the removable volume was a legacy from having platters, you know, like the Plasmon type platters. So any of you that are 20-year users, which by the way, we have a few users in here that are, a few meaning I think 3 or 4, that are 20-year users of Laserfiche, which is amazing. But anyway, so Plasmon drive where you'd actually pull the drive out and it's removable from Laserfiche, so it's no longer viewable once the platter is removed. But you can use that with CD and DVD. So imagine in your organization you have something so highly secured, it needs to get put on like a DVD or something like that, and you can just put it in a safe. And then when you want to view those documents, you just pull it out of the safe, you pop it in the CD drive, and then Laserfiche will make it available only for you when you put that physical drive in, you know, that disk. So if you have something so super duper confidential, which some people in here I'm sure do, that's an option you do with a jump drive as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for that removable volume configuration, you basically give it the path to where you would have that, maybe on your F drive where the DVD drive is, or the flash drive that you've got plugged in is, or external drive, and then tell it what you want to store on that removable path.
So I would think of that as something like, you don't even want the IT, like let's say you're a director and you've got something so highly confidential, you don't even want the IT administrators to even have access to. That's kind of an example of how that would work. You would have it and it would only be there on your CD, but it'd be visible in Laserfiche, searchable, all that, and you just pull it out and put it back in the safe. Mm-hmm. So there's an example for you, another security.
Yeah. So the second kind of piece of security I wanted to go over was using security tags. So security tags, there's kind of 2 different types of tags in Laserfiche. We have information tags, which Patrick was using in his records management demo that showed for the approvals in records management. And then we also have security tags. So security tags are basically just they operate in the same way as an information tag, except they also have this added function of locking a document from users that don't have that tag assigned to them. So this is great for security that's user accessible. Most security options aren't something that the average maybe manager or supervisor is going to go in and change the access rights on a file. Instead, they can use this security tag, which is a simple checkbox on a document. The most common uses for this tend to be if you've got groups of files that are accessible by maybe an entire department, but occasionally you get one document in there that is a sealed court case file, perhaps, that needs to be sealed based on court order. You can actually use that security tag to seal all of those documents so that they would basically become inaccessible to users that don't have the that tag assigned to them. So we can allow users to add security, and you can also assign that tag to individual users, or you can assign the tag to groups as well. That way you can allow the use of this tag at the group level and not have to go to every single user properties to give it to them. Another component to security tags, as well as information tags, is the ability to have it automatically place a watermark on the document that has a tag assigned to it. This can be really powerful for tracking who printed a secured document or exported a secured document and sent it out to somebody. If you've got a watermark on that document, it'll say right across the page, confidential, or whatever you choose for the text of that watermark. And you can also have tokens used in that watermark so that it shows the username of the person that was looking at it when they printed it, or the date and time that it was exported on. All those can be included in the text of that watermark, making it very trackable back to who actually exported that document. And then secondly, we can also automatically apply tags using workflow. There's an activity for assign tags that can be used whenever a workflow runs on that document. And it might be that when you have your filing workflows putting documents into their appropriate folders, you might have a check in there if it's a specific type of document, automatically add a confidential tag, which will then lock that document automatically without having to have somebody go in and actually check that box. That can be useful for preventing unexpected access to documents. Automating anything certainly prevents the amount of time that it gets forgotten. Did anybody have any questions? Okay.
Is there any kind of feature differentiation between watermarking a printed document versus looking on the page? Maybe I don't want them to see it, but when it gets printed out, it watermarks it?
The watermark is applied even in the viewing window. So the question is there any differentiation between printing, exporting, and viewing with the watermarks? And no. There are 3 different types of watermarks, however. Tag watermarks is just one of them. You can also watermark documents at the group level and say everybody in this group watermarks things that they print or export. And that one is not a view watermark. That one's just print and export. And then there's also, you can just optionally apply a watermark when you export a document or print a document.
Let's say I create a security tag and I apply it to, a handful of documents in a folder that has a lot of documents. And I'm the security officer who's responsible for adding and removing that tag to the documents. But I want to know, I'm going to do a sanity check just for myself, and I want to know all the documents that have that tag just to make sure I have everything covered. Is it easy enough to search for the security tags?
It is easy. You can actually, so the question is if there's a folder with a large number of documents in there and only some of them are tagged, what's a simple way to figure out which of those documents are tagged? So in the Laserfiche client, you can actually show a column that will tell you if it has a tag on it. Which it's around here, has tags. So has tags will show you that a tag is applied. It doesn't tell you which tag it is, however. So if you're wanting to just see that list, no would certainly give you enough information to know that that hasn't been tagged. The yes value would mean, okay, I need to open that and look at it. Now, a simpler way, or an alternative way, would be to use the search for that, where you can search by the tag that's applied. And then you could restrict that to a within folder search as well.
So that when you're searching for tags, it includes all the informational tags and the security tags?
It does. So, I can select any of the tags I want to search on, and I just highlight the one that I want to specifically search on. Or if I control click, I can select multiple and say, show me all the documents that have one of these 3 tags assigned, or all of these 3 tags, depending on what my selection is here.
Does it let you see in that list tags that you wouldn't have permissions for?
No, it does not show you that. So in this search capability, you're not going to see a tag that you don't have access to. So as far as you're concerned, if a tag isn't assigned to you, it doesn't exist, and documents that are assigned that tag don't exist. So I've talked a lot about a tag being assigned to a user. That's probably one of the easiest things to miss when you're creating tags, and I wanted to make sure I looked at that specifically. So tags are created from the tags section of the administration console. Information tags show up with a little blue eye next to them. Security tags show up with a little orange shield next to them to show that they're security tags. When I create a tag, I have the option of making it a security tag or not. It's important to note that if you make something a security tag, you cannot make it into an informational tag later. Informational tags can be turned into a security tag, though, if you needed to. So you can basically check the box on any of these information tags that already exist to make it a security tag. And it will warn me here that this is irreversible and you can't undo this. So something to keep an eye out for. But getting to the security tag and who they're assigned to. So here, if I open up one of the tags that's already a security tag, I can click the View button, and it'll show me who it's currently assigned to, which is useful for, it'll show me groups or users that are listed here. It's great for determining who has access to those documents. But to assign this tag to a user, I have to actually have to go to the user or group properties that I want to modify. So if we needed to assign a tag to the Human Resources Department, right in the properties for the user or group, there's a Tags tab that I can just check which tags this group has access to. And now they can use that tag on any document that they can modify or change. So to apply a tag, you do have to have the combination of rights of being able to modify the document you're tagging and having access to that tag. So any questions, other questions about tags?
If you have multiple security tags, would it be if you have any of those tags assigned to you, you can view it? Is there any way to alternatively make it so that all the tags?
Tags are cumulative. So if you have two users, they each have their own confidential tag. If one person tags it, the other person won't be able to see it. But if a third user that has access to both tags it with both tags, neither of the users that only have one of those tags would be able to see that document. You'd have to have all of the tags that are applied to that document to be able to see it. So yeah, tags are kind of like a deny privilege on those. So it denies the access to users that don't have that tag. It's not a granting rights security kind of situation.
So then security tags, they really don't have anything to do with the security that's on the folder or the documents. It's additive to that in that the security tag just makes it visible to you. It doesn't give you any other privileges as far as modifying or deleting or moving or.
Right. So the question is the security tag capability linked to the folder access rights, and does it grant any other rights like that? And it's purely can you see it or not? The access rights for can you modify that, can you delete it, can you rename it, can you add or remove other tags, those are all folder properties. So this is just kind of, it's like a padlock on the outside of the document and that's it. If you've got access to modify that document and you have the tag, you can modify to your heart's content. If you don't have access to that tag, it'll be invisible in your folders. So you won't even see that that document exists if you don't have access to the tag.
What if you have a link to it that goes directly to there? Would you still be able to get into the document?
So if you have a shortcut or a link to that document, it will give you a permission denied message if you don't have access to the tag that's applied to that document. So the third out of these three categories that I wanted to look at is effective access rights. So Many of you probably already know and are quite familiar with assigning access rights to users and groups or granting them access to browse files and look at files. But viewing access rights can be a very important part of being able to make sure that specific users have the rights that you would expect them to. The effective rights tab is actually a portion of the access rights dialog. So when you right-click on a document or a folder and select access rights, it gives you a dialog that you can assign rights. There's a tab that's kind of innocuous there, the effective rights tab, that will allow you to select any user in the system or Windows account in your Active Directory and see, it'll evaluate what rights that user has on this folder. We can choose a group or a user for that, and it can be a Laserfiche user, a Laserfiche group, or a Windows group or a Windows user. And it'll show all of the inherited rights that they've gotten from any of their groups and from any of the parent folders that access rights have been assigned to. Question?
Will it actually go out and search Active Directory, or is it only the Active Directory users you pulled in?
It actually has an Active Directory browser for selecting those AD users. It doesn't have to be one that's referenced in Laserfiche or linked directly to a Laserfiche user. You can just select any Active Directory group or user that's there. And then, we can certainly look at the group rights. Generally, the effective rights, I tend to use a user in that group to see if they're a member of other groups. That's really where you're looking at these effective rights. Is what is their cumulative permissions on this folder from all the groups they're members of. Slightly related, I mentioned inherited rights. Rights in Laserfiche, as well as many other systems, inherit from the parent folder that any of the documents or subfolders are members of. They can be hidden in the access rights dialog. There's simply a checkbox right above the list of users that says show inherited rights. You can uncheck that to see what the explicit rights on a folder or a document are. The inheritance on that is assigned can also be modified using the scope selection in the access rights dialog. So this allows us to get very creative with our security rights, allowing perhaps a user to browse a folder structure but not see any documents anywhere, which may not be all that useful. But you can also set it up so that users can see the documents and search for the documents, but they can't browse the folder structure. Browsing the folder structure might either be too confusing for users if it's in maybe the records management area. So disallowing users from browsing, or just not allowing them, and allowing them to search the documents might be a simpler approach for that. It also can be an integral part to the transparent records management. If you've got a folder structure set up that users in a department or group are browsing for in their folder structure that has shortcuts to the records folders, they don't really need to see the records folders, but they do need rights to the documents to access them. So setting up the scope of inheritance on that can be set to documents only. And then finally, with inheritance, you can actually disable the inheritance, which is generally against best practices. Instead, you should use the scope, the varying scopes to configure your security. Disabling inheritance on a folder can actually make administration difficult. If an admin doesn't have rights to a folder, they may not be able to administer the system correctly. Question, Quinn?
So a quick question, something we had incident recently that I haven't had time to test. If you disable inheritance and then move at some point in the future, move that folder, does it re-enable inheritance?
So the question is if you disable inheritance on a folder and then move that folder somewhere else, will it re-enable inheritance? Not to my knowledge. It should leave it how it is because it's a property of that folder.
Okay, we just had some restructuring and all of a sudden inheritance was re-enabled. We didn't know, we just forgot to set those folders in the library, reset it itself.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure of the exact situation of moving folders that have their inheritance disabled. We can actually take a look at that when we go into the live system. So I mentioned access right scope. It modifies how the inheritance occurs. We use the scope to avoid disabling inheritance so that we can retain things that like system accounts have access to, the workflow user account that actually performs all of your workflow actions. If you disable inheritance, you have to make sure you add that back into there. And if it gets forgotten, workflow won't be able to touch any documents in that folder area. And then we also use the scope to avoid using the deny access right. Denial, while it may be useful in some situations, tends to be a best practice to avoid using that. Instead, just having an unset privilege would allow the user to inherit from other groups that they should have access rights, but doesn't prevent other users from accessing documents that they should have access rights to based on their other group memberships. And then we can also, we use this in a lot of different situations. The scopes are quite varied in their capabilities and what they're used for. But primarily, one of the major uses is allowing users access to subfolders of a document or subfolders of a folder, but not all of the folders in that folder, where you would grant permissions to view just that one folder using the this entry only scope. And then on the subfolders, you would then grant the rights to the folders they should have access to. That way it allowed them to see the parent folder that they can click on, and then inside that they would only see the ones that they've been specifically granted access to. In many cases, previously you might have to do disable the inheritance and then grant rights at that folder for everything that they would need access to. This way it will be more usable in the future if you need to make changes or add new system accounts or users. You won't have to worry about going to every single non-inheriting folder to go check the access rights. So then we'll go ahead and go into the administration console and the client and take a look.
Yeah, what's a good way for users to test them? So they set the security rights within Laserfiche, they go through, they set the inheritance. It can be pretty complicated, can be pretty sophisticated. What's a good way to do that?
So the question I have is, what is the good way to test the access rights that you've modified using scope or inheritance and whatnot? One of the best ways is using that effective rights tab that I mentioned, where you can go, once you've configured your scope, you can browse down into a subfolder that you would expect them to have access to or not have access to, and look at the effective rights that that user has. Another method would be to open up another copy of the client and log in as a different user, which you can, if they're Laserfiche user accounts, you might create a test user that you can add to the groups that you're modifying, or have another user log in and give it a try as well is another, one of the most, probably the straightforward option. Ask somebody, can you see what you need to see in that folder? But if you're modifying security and don't want them to be looking in there yet because you haven't made sure that they can't access things they can't access, the effective rights tab is probably the best way to do that.
Just as a side note, as a user myself, I'm a very big user of Laserfiche, as you can imagine. Whenever I set user security, we have pretty intricate security in our system, and our users all use Windows authentication. So we don't have username and password at all. They all just use authentication with Windows. And so what I'll do is I'll just set a temporary password and I'll have a really intricate security setting. I'll actually set a temporary password. I'll log in as that user temporarily just to verify their security settings are all correct. And then I'll disable the password after I complete their settings. Just because I like to double check on something. So that's another strategy you can try.
So what Patrick was just mentioning, so being able to enable a password for a Laserfiche account depends on your configuration a little bit. If you have individual users created as Laserfiche users that are then linked to a Windows account, they're kind of a dual purpose account. One is you can log in with Windows authentication and it makes you, you're basically impersonating the user, the Laserfiche user as your Windows account, which gives you the capability of opening up a user, and you would see an account in here where it's linked to the Bryce Cities digital account. But we could also set up a password so that we can log in as that user and give it a test. And then once I'm done testing, I can disable that password. That way the user logs in with their Windows account, but gives you an extra way to be that user for a short time. If you're using Windows accounts, if you're directly linked and you don't have a Laserfiche account like that, you wouldn't be able to do that particular method of testing. The only way to log in as an account that isn't linked to a Laserfiche user is to actually log into Windows as that account, or use the run as a different user option when you're launching an application. So with the getting to the effective rights, so if I wanted to see if the NW user has access to Tom Brady's folder, if I look at access rights on Brady, Tom, I can see all of the rights that are inherited down to this folder. I can see that user, WF, LF forms, Patrick Demos admin account, the Laserfiche admin account, all have been granted at the root of the repository, and it's inheriting everywhere in the repository. And then Judge and Justin are both granted rights to the records folder, or the records series that's apparent to this one. There aren't any explicit rights that have been added onto here. It would say not inherited. But I can go to the effective rights tab, which by default shows the current connection. What does my current login have access to? And depending on your brightness level, you may or may not be able to see the grayed out checkboxes here. But I can choose a different user, either from the list of repository trustees, which lists the Windows accounts, users, and groups that are all referenced in Laserfiche, or I can just say, browse a domain account. Now, on this computer, we don't have a domain controller, so it doesn't actually have anything to browse. But I can select any of the Laserfiche users to look at. So I can say, does the mobile account have access to this? And I can see that it is granted 0 rights. So mobile would not see or be able to access this document anymore. Now I mentioned scope. If you're not familiar with scope, it is listed next to each assignment of rights. And if it's been directly assigned to a folder, you can modify it. If it's inheriting from a folder, you cannot modify that or anything about the access rights. So I would have to go to the folder that this is assigned to, which is shown right here, and I can just browse directly to there to check it. So here I can see that there are actually some scope assignments that are different from the default. So here I can see that this entry has had everything denied for the judge user. So on this folder, the 002 Northwest Natural Records, judge cannot see or do anything with that folder. The other rights assignment for judge here is for this folder, subfolders, and documents, which the net effect of this is that the judge can't see this record folder, the record series 002 NW Natural Records, but they'll be able to search and browse all of the subfolders. So if they run a search and it brings up a folder, they can double click and open it and look at the documents inside. But they wouldn't be able to actually just browse directly to it from when they first log into the client.
Bryce, why would that be useful? Just curious.
A useful aspect, the main reason for doing that is to avoid confusion. If you've got transparent records management enabled, it might be confusing to users to see 2 folder sets that contain all of their documents. If you just deny them from seeing the record series area because they don't use the documents in that way, just give them access to their department folder that they would be browsing and looking at. So pretty much any security situation can be handled at the folder level with the access rights like that, with using the scopes. Any question?
In that situation, let's say user searched for a document title, would they get both the actual record and shortcuts to it that are in other folders?
So the question is if a user performs a search in Laserfiche, do they get the results showing for the shortcut and the regular document? Depending on the search. So like a metadata search normally doesn't return any shortcuts. It just gives you the real documents. A document name search or a entry ID search would return a shortcut if the name of that shortcut matches or the entry ID is that one. The within folder search, so with transparent records management, there's actually an option that that Laserfiche has for evaluating shortcuts when you run a search. So if you only had access to the shortcut folders area for browsing, and when a user runs a search for metadata and they select, oh, I only want to search in my department folders, without that option turned on, they wouldn't find any results because it's only shortcuts in their folder area. By enabling that property on that, it allows users to search kind of through shortcuts. It resolves all the shortcuts.
And then for the path field in their little search results, is that going to point to how you get to it through records management or the shortcut?
The path would always show the actual document.
Okay.
So, well, if you found a shortcut in your results, like by a document name search, it would show where the shortcut's at. But metadata searches, text searches should always return the document itself rather than the shortcut. Another question?
Just a little side trip back into volume security.
Mm-hmm.
You have access rights on there too. I know there's some features in volumes that you need. You need them for you have to checksums and your encryption. But could you do all of your security at the folder level as opposed to doing any of it on the volume level?
Yeah. So the question is, can we use folder level security to fulfill pretty much all of our needs and not have to do anything with the volume security or other aspects of that? And for the most part, yes. The folder security is kind of the first line of defense for setting up your security. That should be the first place you go to set that up. Volume security or template security or field security should always be something that's in addition to the folder rights. Volume security, you don't, one of the main reasons to set up volume security is so that users can't store documents into volumes they shouldn't be storing them to. So if you have separation of your documents maybe on different file servers, maybe your engineering volume is on one network location and your human resources volume is in another entirely different network location, you wouldn't want engineering to be able to select the human resources volume and store documents to there.
But couldn't that also be achieved using folder security?
The folders and volumes aren't explicitly linked or intrinsically linked. So you could have access to the HR volume, but none of the documents in it because they're all in folder structures that you don't have access to.
So if an administrator should make a mistake and leave an engineering folder out on the HR volume, then the HR volume security might keep somebody from in the engineering department from putting something out there.
Yeah, so if you added security to volumes maybe later down the road, and maybe at some point somebody in the engineering department that was scanning documents was scanning them all to the HR volume, and you go in and add or prevent users from accessing the HR volume unless they're in the HR group, all of a sudden they'll be able to see the documents. Engineering can still see the document or the file in the folder structure, but when they open it up, they'll get a message telling them that each of those pages has an access denied and you can't look at the page. You can still look at the metadata and tags that are applied to it and that kind of thing, but you can't see thumbnails or images. Luckily, you can actually migrate documents between volumes after the fact. So as an administrator, you would go in and fix the documents that are in the wrong volume, usually involving a search for everything within a folder structure that's not in the engineering volumes, and then select them and migrate them to the engineering volume.
Thank you.
Right, I'll just add to that. I think that's a really interesting topic that's been brought up about the volumes and how that data is being managed, because different users will decide how they want that data managed, whether they want to have a separate volume per department, which is what we're talking about right here, which is HR might be, their records might be so sensitive that they want to have their own volume, and they lock the volume down saying, no access to any groups outside of HR. Any users that's not in an HR security group has access to anything in this volume. But what that forces the users to do in HR is that they always have to choose that volume or set it as default. And correct me if I'm wrong on anything here, Bryce. He's the expert here, so I'm just the user. It requires the user to choose that volume every time they want to scan or set it as a default for HR. And so that's one method to really secure and lock down, whereas you could have, separately, you might choose to do what we were looking at earlier, which is the volumes that are logical, because a lot of people choose this purely based on wanting to break volumes down to a certain size, or you might want to have an entire cohesive volume structure for the entire organization. So that's a good way to make a decision, I think, on security at the departmental level. And that can be changed. I guess that's another important thing to mention, because sometimes one user might make this decision in 10 years, or again, some of these folks here, 20 years later, there might be somebody else that says, well, we got a better way we want to do this now, we want to make changes. You can change these volume structures. It's not terribly difficult. It takes some time for Laserfiche to calculate and move everything, but if you wanted to break documents out into a departmental level at this point per volume, you can do that retroactively and modify that.
Yeah. There's a kind of one of the choices you just have to decide on is, do you want a folder or a volume per department, which can be a little bit unwieldy when you're managing all of these other separate volumes, or just put everything in one file system location. None of the volume choices about where things are stored is really impacting the users that are looking up documents. It will impact the users that are scanning documents because they have to tell it which volume to go to. But having just a single volume that rolls over automatically to keep them at a manageable size has kind of been more of the more current method for doing things, because there's not as much desire to segregate every department's documents on the back end where it doesn't really impact users at all. But some situations do warrant a special volume that you do need to encrypt, like HR or something along those lines, where you don't want to encrypt everything in the repository, because then everybody is impacted by the slight performance hit when you have encryption enabled. So you can separate those out specifically. And I've even suggested using workflow to put documents into the appropriate volume, using workflow just to automate putting them into the correct volume. So one less choice that users have.
Got a question over here. Is there a way to globally locate which folders in a repository do not inherit access rights from the parent folder?
So yeah, as far as so the question is are you able to run a search for all the folders that are set to not inherit permissions? There isn't a method in the Laserfiche interfaces, but I believe you can use the SDK or toolkit to find out that information. And for a while, Laserfiche actually had a tool that would go out and run a report and generate a list of all of the access rights assigned to every explicit rights assignment in your repository, which would include whether it's inherited or not. I'm not sure of the status of that tool right now. I think it stopped working at some point.
That tool set, we actually had a customer who needed that about a month ago, and we ran it, and it does require it's at least 8 or 9, so most everybody should have that. But you can run it, it'll just run down the root and give you a report of, I don't know if it'll tell you whether it's inherited or not, but we could look into that tool set. I know that, yeah, it is available, it's free, it's just a tool from Laserfiche, yeah.
So by default, you cannot search on the inheritance or rights in the folder structure, but special tools can. So that kind of takes care of the 3 kind of security things: volume, security tags, and viewing effective rights. So,
does anybody have any other general questions about security? Any ideas for Bryce?
And I'll be around all day in case anybody has any questions.
So we're going to take a 10-minute break here and use the restroom, but before we do, want to let you know what's coming up next is the Word integration with Forms. And if we have some time still, which I think we probably will afterwards, we're going to do a sneak peek of the GIS mapping integration with ArcGIS. So make sure to come back for that too. And then we'll have the open forum. So again, users can really bring up any topics, any questions, either to us or back to them. And then we have the workshop this afternoon. Don't forget, there's lunch and then there's a workshop with a whole bunch of other topics. So
And we'll be raffling off the scanner then.
and we're raffling off the scanner for those of you that are here. So your name's already been entered in. It's in the fishbowl over there. So anyway, we'll be back in 10 minutes and we'll pick up on the Laserfiche Forms integration. All right, we are back. We are back. Welcome, welcome. We're going to continue on with the integration with Microsoft Word for Laserfiche forms. And what I'd like to do is give you just all a brief overview on what this subject is really all about and some of the use cases for this. So Laserfiche forms has frequently been a method for input into, hang on one second. Okay. All right. So Laserfiche forms has been usually used as an input method, right? To be able to grab all this information and be able to send that to other databases, to other systems, or just archive a document that's been generated. But now what we want to do, and what we've heard from a lot of customers, is how can we take that and push that into a piece of correspondence? How can we push that into possibly an agenda? So in our office, when we put together meetings every month, we do an all-company meeting, and we get together and we request that everybody submit agenda items through Laserfiche forms that they might possibly want in the upcoming meeting. We got to a point where we said, well, we can push things into PDFs, because maybe some of you are doing that with Laserfiche workflow. That's a standard function. But we wanted to go a couple steps further. We wanted to push into our own template, our own Word template, and be able to take those agenda items and push them in there. So we came up with this integration with Microsoft Word. So we think that this might be a great solution for a number of your needs where it comes to taking information that's been gathered from Laserfiche forms and pushing it into a standard Microsoft Word template. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Ryan, and he's going to give you a demonstration.
Okay, so my name is Ryan Catalita. I'm an account manager at Cities Digital out of Pacific Northwest here. And I'll tell you, I drew the long straw for this one. This is the most exciting presentation I think we've got today because it's new, it's different. And you're not going to find this from another reseller of Laserfiche. This is something that I'll tell you our development team did again. They are the premier development partner, and they were able to come up with a really cool integration with this. And I am just super stoked to get right in there. All right, so I'll start with it's essentially a tale of three document processes. And the way I visualized it was tools. I kind of view myself as an amateur carpenter. I'm a terrible carpenter, honestly. But I understand the tools, the appropriate tool for the appropriate job. We often have to do canned responses. I know I do for my job, and I know a lot of people do as well. And there are ways to simplify that process with the right tool. And so we're going to start quickly with revising an old document. Now, this is something I'm sure everyone here has done. I know Patrick does this to me all the time. He says, hey, send out a response about this particular topic. You're about to visit a client. Make sure you bring this up. And I say, I don't know how to do that. He sends me an old document. I just make a few quick changes, and I'm ready to go. It's pretty easy. Now, it's really good for infrequent correspondence. It's pretty straightforward, and it's really highly customizable to just revise an old document. But if you do it a lot, and you're sending out that same document again and again, you realize that there's high potential for error. Sometimes, if I'm trying to be too fast, I will overlook things. I didn't drop the right name out, I didn't swap the dates, maybe the address was a little bit different, and I made a mistake, and I can look quite silly doing that. It's not really a scalable solution when you have a lot to send out. If I have a canned response for 1 or 2 people, not a big deal, but what if I have hundreds and hundreds? And that can be quite cumbersome. It requires an original document. I have to have the original, and I have to be able to find it. And of course, it's not ideal for standardization, as it's just essentially correcting something. I kind of view this as your standard hand sew. It's good for a couple things. You got a quick little cut you want to make, it's perfect. Don't need it's not complicated, just in and out. The appropriate tool for the appropriate job. Okay, so now the next scenario that we're at. You've created a Word template. And the templates can take a lot of different formats. Fillable text, it can simply be an old document with a different naming convention. They're typically more locked down. You see this a lot with, that's why I have this contract pulled up. Maybe the only places that are editable are where you're adding your name or a signature or something. Let's see, these are some templates that focus on the layout from Word, and there's the fillable box there, so you can type what kind of ninja you are, and that's the only thing you can edit. And this is a really nice way to put out a standardized document, but at the same time, spend only time focusing on the relevant information. And this is a little bit better, I think, than revising a document. Okay, so some of the pros being a little more standardized. You've got better version control, and it's really easy to lock down the relevant parts. It's scalable in specific contexts. But unfortunately, it can be a little bit time-consuming to create them. There are kind of limited autofill options. I know that back in the day, I used to run an English summer camp, and we had to make certificates for everyone. And you can use mail merge to populate a lot of data about names and maybe schools that the students are from. But it's kind of limited what I could auto-populate into that. I had to be from an Excel spreadsheet, and it could be a little bit cumbersome to do that. Certainly with the typical Word template, it's a little bit difficult to sync data from multiple sources. So other than that Excel file, I really had a hard time like putting something to autofill for me. And of course, like any template, like any document, it's vulnerable to modification. If somebody moves the document or changes the template and no one notices, that can have pretty huge impacts down the line. And I kind of view this as the chop saw, the miter saw. This is pretty good for a lot of quick cuts. We can do a lot of things, but it's not an ideal solution for everyone and everything, and certainly not big projects. So that brings us to our next scenario. I'm thinking about how can I take a Word template and really kind of expand upon it. I've got a situation here. Does anyone here in the room work at a community college? Oh, nice. We've got a nice contingent here from the community college. So I remember when I applied to college, there were a lot of documents I had to submit in order to even be considered for admittance. What's your process for if a document is incomplete, if something's missing to the application process? How would you notify the student, the potential incoming student? How would you put that together?
Either mail out a letter to them or email them.
Okay, and how would you generate that letter?
Well, we have different forms. The letters that we already use, they're in Banner system that we mail out to them.
Okay.
So if they're just needs something on the checklist for admission.
Okay, so you use your Banner system to.
And then we also have a CRM.
And then the CRM and then you work together to generate a letter to send out. Okay, cool. And that's one way to do it, of course. But now I want to show you what we've got here. Through Forms Word Fill. Wham! There it is. Forms and Laserfiche Word Fill. And essentially what it is populating metadata in a Word template from the Laserfiche repository through Laserfiche Forms. So we're able to really have a lot greater range to populate mail merge fields in a document. And like I mentioned earlier, using an Excel file to populate mail merge fields is one way to do it. This really dramatically increases the breadth of information that you can pull in and then push out into a template. So let's take a look at it. And this is the part where we start getting the cool stuff here. All right. Okay, we're going to go to the Laserfiche Forms inbox. And we are going to start a new process, and let's do a pretty basic one. There's a 401k withdrawal payout setup. And this is, I think, akin in a lot of ways to a college submission, and then having some kind of reply that's needed based on the number of documents received. So we'll start by putting in a member's name. Let's give them a social security number. That looks legit. And then we're going to check a couple of reasons why we're going to unfortunately have to reject this application. We're going to check. Notarization is required. It's missing member signature. And let's do a custom one here too. Let's see. Oh, nice. This is what my mother would reply with. Yes, because I said so. And then we're going to submit that and see what it looks like. All right. So the form has been submitted. I believe this has been set up to automatically throw this right into Laserfiche. So you've got a copy stored. It's all ready to go there. We are going to download it and have a look at it.
Right, just scroll down on the.
Is it scroll? Oh,
You're
on the screen.
video screen. Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Oh, and now we got 2 copies. Awesome. All right. So we've generated this document. We've got her name. She's already in our database, so we've got the automatic address, and we've got this really great letter. So we've got the different reasons why the application could not be completed. And it's just ready to go. It looks good, and it's ready to go. So that's a pretty easy way to do that. Now let's go back. And look how that's configured. All right. I'm just bouncing around here. Okay, here we go. So the way this works is through this Forms Word Fill configuration panel. And we've got our payout withdrawal set up, and we've got a template that's been uploaded to it. So let's take a look at that template. We can download it here. All right, it's this one. That was not it. All right. Let's see which one of these lucky guys it is. All right, well, whatever, download it again. Okay, here we go. So we can see the merge fields here. And these are directly linked to the form in Laserfiche. So you got name, address, city, state, member name. And then this bookmark here is where we can push through those options of the reasons why. That's where the bookmark is. All right. So what I want to do now is actually customize this a little bit. So we will go back in here. Oh my goodness, I keep clicking the wrong box. All right. All right, here we go. So we're back in Laserfiche Forms, and we can click on our Manage tab. And we are going to pull up that withdrawal payment form. So we're back to that buildable and configurable form here. Got the different items on the side. Let's add a box right now. Let's do this. Let's go for it. All right. And we are going to call this variable, we'll call this NFL. Okay. And the variable is going to be NFL. Okay. And that should be good. Great. Did that save? I did not save. Okay, sorry. We'll put it back on here. Field name, we'll call this NFL team, and we'll call it variable NFL. Done. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to link that up with the actual template, which is pretty straightforward. Okay, so this is our template we've got loaded, and we're going to add a little field in here. So you start by going to simply insert, and we're going to go over to quick parts and add a field. Scroll down to the side here, and we're going to do merge field. And we're going to give this field name a variable, and we're going to call it NFL. Okay. And then we're going to type a little text into our document here. Thank you for supporting your favorite team. And there. Okay, we're going to save this template here. That's pretty straightforward. And then we are going to get rid of the previous upload in the system, which is somewhere hidden on this desktop. Then we're going to simply go back into our little configuration and pull up choose a, let's start here again. We are going to edit our payout setup here and choose the appropriate file, which should be this one. Okay, and then we'll save. All right. Now we are going to head back to Laserfiche Forms. And we'll start the process again and see if that field has been added. Okay, so we're going to fill this out again. All right, my member name's Sally. All right, you know what? And she loves the Cleveland Browns because you know what? I'm from Cleveland, and I am not giving up on that team yet. And let's see, we're going to have to say that we're going to have to reject this because you're cheering for a losing team. And hopefully, if I've dotted my I's and crossed my T's, I'll be able to push this out. Yep, she's been cheering for a losing team. And it looks like I made a mistake in my variable somewhere. I'm not exactly sure where that mixed up, but it's essentially, it links to this new template, and then you'll have that new one pushed in there. I think what we should show now is a little different view of this. So that's nice for fillable, kind of canned responses. We've got other things we can do too. So Patrick mentioned the agendas. And I will show you what that one looks like. All right. So we've got a new meeting coming up. Let's do a meeting tomorrow. We're going to be discussing a new playground. This is an issue that keeps coming up. And oh, the information's auto-populated, so that was really nice to pull that in. I don't have to fill out this form myself. Topic number 2, let's call that NFL teams and office apparel. Here, I can't spell apparel. Office stuff. And we will say that Ryan needs to stop wearing brown apparel, brown stuff. Okay, we'll submit that. And let's have a look at what this is. Okay, and then we've got there. And you know what? Our office is really quite special. So I want to add a snowflake to that because, well, football, wintertime, that's kind of how I always view it. So I'm going to be able to edit that. Each organization is unique, and so is our office. And, well, I'm going to try to paste that. Oh, got to enable some editing. And there we go. We've got heavily edited document there. So it's really nice that we were able to have this template and then push stuff into it to edit it, and then you can go from there.
So I think hopefully what you've seen here in Ryan's demo, and I have to give him a little bit of a break. He jumped onto my demo VM, which is a little messy. He's been working on his nice clean one all week practicing, so he's kind of digging around for stuff on my demo VM until I submit it here. But what we've seen is that we can use Laserfiche forms to collect all that information. So from an agenda perspective, each one of those items is pre-configured. So lucky for you, you won't have to dig through all that Ryan was doing. That'll all be pre-configured for you. You do it once, you set it up. And then you've got a copy of that Word document you can download. And you can save that Word document back to Laserfiche into a workflow if you needed to. Because, of course, in Word, we've got the add-in, right? So we can save to Laserfiche. Or if we wanted to, instead of having to actually download that Word document manually by ourselves, we could just have Workflow take that. So the agenda would just be automatically updated, route that to a folder instead of having to download it and manually have that Word document outside of Laserfiche. Can anybody see any good uses for this that you've been hoping to use this for? What would anybody in here want to volunteer anything they would use it for? Yes?
Well, we don't use forms yet. We don't have the right edition of Laserfiche, but I can see then that one of the good uses for this would be that you could streamline the creation of documents and the storage in Laserfiche of documents in one go. In other words, there would never be like storing this stuff out on a file share or saving it to your C drive or printing it out or anything like that. It's like you create the document and then you archive the document almost in one go.
Right, and you're actually just having Laserfiche automate the creation of records, which is really neat. Instead of just being an archiver only, I think this is, forms and this Word add-in really shows you how Laserfiche can generate the documents now. Was there another idea over here we had?
Oh, we were discussing agendas for our tribal council.
Okay, excellent. I think this one thing that hopefully is glaring at all of you in the face about this, not only how many windows we had, but one other thing would be Agenda Manager, which is Laserfiche's agenda product, has been kind of floating out there and not a lot of new features added. And a lot of people have come to us and said, we'd like to use forms as opposed to Agenda Manager or as opposed to Granicus or some of those other solutions. This is possibly, maybe, a solution that is sort of a halfway solution for you. We don't by any means think that we're as good as Granicus or their solutions, but this just gives you that option to configure it yourself, which is really nice.
Yeah, I kind of view this integration as like 1 foot in a turbocharged template and 1 foot in a business process. You're already in the system with the ability to kind of getting ahead in my PowerPoint here, but you can put it in the approval process. You can get submissions for the agenda from other people. This really makes that Word creation process like already going through a business process. So you can have it be part of the forms inbox, you get the approvals, the signatures. You can send out notifications about this document. Hey, somebody needs to look at this. Hey, this has been created. Shortcuts, obviously, to have multiple people edit the same document. And, of course, multiple collection points. It doesn't have to be simply one person adding agenda items. You can have multiple people work on that as well.
Can you look at it at the same time?
At the exact same time, no. But it won't let you both make your own separate copy either. So also, when we work with Laserfiche forms, we can auto-populate all those fields. Like some of them, obviously, I had already pre-configured, but you can have the workflow do a lookup and then fill out a lot of those fields on those forms. So if you've got a student who's got a lot of information that's going to go out, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you populate an email template versus a Word doc?
We could.
Can you repeat the question?
In this configuration, it's not. Yeah, can you repeat that question?
Can we populate an email template and not just a Word?
We could. Right now, it's just set up for Word, but we could certainly call Outlook and pop open an email message.
I keep thinking about a 301 system.
Oh.
Where you could do that, have it go through the forms of the workflow to the right person to answer that issue or get it resolved, and have it populate an email back to the person with a Word document. But
well, you know what even might be better? We're thinking about using Word and Outlook. What actually might be better is just using forms, just inherent functionality in forms. So if they're using 311 and they're filling it out, and they've got an incident or a request or whatever it might be, forms can automatically shoot an email confirmation back to them. So without even doing any of the form fill stuff, it can shoot back an email just saying,
I was thinking about once the issue was resolved, for example, they could send them back in a company. People find and say, hey, this has been resolved, thanks for problems on fixed or something like that.
Sure, yeah, and we could do that in the, Word. The Word fill would be great for an actual formal piece of correspondence with letterhead and all that good stuff. But forms can just shoot right out the back end an SMTP, email saying confirmed, done. Here's the status. We can do, table in an HTML email. So that would be a good option too. Any other questions while we're? Yes.
Does it only work with a particular version of Word?
It is. I believe it's 2007 and more recent.
Yeah,
I believe so. Yes. Yes.
So you go through this whole process. It creates your document. That gets saved into the Laserfiche repository.
If you'd like, the question is, if the document's created, does it save in Laserfiche repository? You can certainly, you have the option to.
And then you could also print physical copy and say, I need to mail it out, but I want a copy in my Laserfiche repository. I could do that all there,
so
if set up correctly.
So the question is, if you can do a one-stop shop for storing and printing at the same time, the answer is absolutely yes.
We could set this up so that Word document doesn't just pop up in the browser. It just generates and stores it directly to Laserfiche. In fact, we've got another couple interesting pieces, if we have time, we can show where we put buttons right inside the interface of the Laserfiche client. So not forms, which is where Ryan has been showing, but right inside Laserfiche, there's a button on the toolbar that says Generate Correspondence. And you click, and then the document and a folder structure shows up. Hopefully I'm not stealing your thunder. That's
all right. That's right. Does anyone else have any comments or questions about this right now? Go ahead.
So does it actually pull from a database to repopulate some of those stuff? So you put in the name of the individual, then you put in some extra information for the address. It does do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, the question is about populating some of the fields in forms. Forms can be set up to do lookups in databases, and ultimately that's what's going to fill the fields in the mail merge. So certainly that's how it's going.
Are there any default templates, or is there, I'm new to the user group, so excuse the question, but is there any sharing of templates or envision template libraries?
We're talking specifically a Word template?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that would be something that'd be great. I mean, a standard Word template with standard, essentially bookmarks, or not bookmarks, but mail merge tags, which is what Ryan was creating. I think that would be a great idea. We don't have any at the moment. This is so new, but yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah, certainly. I know Word has a lot of templates out there, and they could be configured to work pretty nicely with Laserfiche forms as well. Go ahead.
So like on the, like let's, for example, like an HR application form, so a potential applicant fills it out, like from the web access or something, can fill it out. Is there a place for them, I assume there is there a place for them to attach like a resume?
Okay, yeah, this is kind of going into Laserfiche Forms.
Yeah.
And certainly through the Forms portal, you can have an individual who doesn't have access to Laserfiche fill out a form and submit documents, and then have that routed through.
So would it be PDFs, Word, documents?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have organizations that use like driver's licenses for permits or something like that. It's certainly capable of doing that. Also, I should plug, while we're talking a little bit about it, that Forms can work with payments as well. So we can do taking some documents, have taken some data, but also process payment.
So for an application, just as an example, one of our customers is out there right now doing permits and licensing all through Laserfiche Forms. So anytime there's an application fee, we've looked at how Laserfiche Forms can be filled out and sent to Word, but instead of doing something like that, you might just say at the end of that process, I want to collect a payment fee of $25. They can click, fill in their credit card information, which is all PCI compliant, and none of it gets stored in Laserfiche or Laserfiche Forms. It's all stored in the third-party credit card processing. And then that will accept the payment and then generate a document for an application and push that through. Totally unrelated to this that we're talking about, but payments, in case you're looking to do that too.
Okay. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
How easy is it to interface to other applications? Like, I give you, for example, let's say instead of a agenda, it's an expense report that would ordinarily be in an Excel spreadsheet. So you got a form, you say, well, I had these expenses on this date, and then automate Excel, for example, as opposed to Word.
That'll be the next user group. Yeah, no, automating Excel. So instead of using Word, being able to push data into Excel.
Or any other apps.
Yeah, great idea. It's any of that is possible. Right now, it's just Word is the one that we have done, because that was the highest priority. But I think Excel is a great idea. In fact, we've built a utility right now that allows us to take Excel data. So you could actually grab a table. Let's say you put everything together in Excel and you want to paste it into a table in that Laserfiche Forms infrastructure, where it's got the table in Forms. So you want to be able to just say, copy all these rows of data and then paste it into Laserfiche Forms. You just copy, select, paste right into Laserfiche Forms, and it automatically takes all the data, separates it all out into the form. So we've got something that's kind of interesting. Not quite what you're looking for yet, but we're building all of these tool sets into Forms because everybody's asking for it, things like that. Good idea.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions?
So is the credit card part new? That was something we asked about 6 or 8 months ago.
Oh, the Forms payment integration?
You have a time, so now you can do the embedded.
It's about 6 to 8 months. Probably right about that time frame we've had it. We have a couple users using it, so it's still relatively new. It works with authorized.net. So again, just talking about payment in Forms, it works with authorized.net right now. It works with another payment service called Braintree. And then a lot of you, I believe, have been introduced to Point and Pay. There's a partner out there that we work with called Point and Pay, and they're just a gateway, payment gateway. We've been looking at trying to get that integrated too.
Okay. Go ahead.
How do we get a hold of these wonderful tools?
How do we get a hold of them? Well, we can have a conversation after the user group. If anyone has any particular questions about obtaining this or getting a price quote, we can certainly.
Yeah, if you need more information, just email Ryan or myself, and we can get you all the brochures and documentation and set up information.
Okay. So I also should mention that when you have a bit of data that's also part of a business process, you can get some data about how long that's taking, a step in the equation of the workflow. So having this available gives us better data on where potential bottlenecks are occurring. And so I kind of view this as customization meeting streamlined process. A person doesn't have to to hunt for a document. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy to do. And you can totally edit the final product to make it perfect for the perfect situation. And that's, yeah, so we kind of glossed over it, but it's ultimately a tale of three document processes with simple tools for the right job, but also a workshop is how I view it as the end, this word fill. You're bringing a lot of different things together to push out into Word.
Can we open up the configuration window? Because I think people might have a few questions about the word fill configuration window. And I'll just leave that open and take a look at it real quick.
Sure.
So what Ryan was doing earlier was creating those tags in Word, standard format, like your template, like we were talking about earlier, standard template. He was creating it. But if we go back to the actual word fill setup, so this is the module that allows us to tie back to an individual Word template that we upload, which is what Brian was doing there. Is he uploaded the standard template with the tags that Laserfiche Forms knows about. So he was making an NFL team. That tag was being generated in Laserfiche Forms. So Forms knows where to send it inside that particular layout.
Yeah, and for those reject reasons, we've got the fields here, and then what's actually going to be printed out and seen on when they're checked. What's being pushed into where that bookmark was. That's pretty important aspect of that.
So when you create a Laserfiche form, you basically just create a template, and you wire it up together. Should be all set.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions about Laserfiche form fill or forms in general or anything else? Okay, we are up to the open forum section. And our last user group we had in Seattle, people wanted more open forum time, so we or at least that's what the survey said, so we opened it up to a little extra time in case anybody wants to talk a little bit more about anything in particular. We have implementation expert Bryce over here. He's traveling all around the world doing implementations. Last month he was in Ireland and London, Leeds, sorry, another location somewhere in England, doing implementations for us, but he also does a lot of implementations around here, so a lot of you probably know it. I've been also implementing Laserfiche, more or less selling it, but also implementing it in many years past, but for 14 years. So if you have any questions in general, we'd love to just kind of talk about topics you might have. Anybody have any topics they'd like to talk about? Yes?
How do you use a workflow into a business process?
Ooh, excellent question. So a workflow is not going to be a business process unless it has the business process enabled. So Bryce, this is a great question for you. You should come up here and panel up here. We could actually quick show that, how to make a business process.
So a workflow and a business process is really just I'll start over the camera. A business process is really just a kind of specialized version of a workflow that has extra information. It has the ability to be started from a button in the toolbar, and it also has extra reporting information about the status it's at and the instructions that are currently waiting, any deadlines, participants that are assigned to the business process. And that's turning that on in workflow is really just a checkbox to make it available for the toolbar button. So I'll go ahead and open up a workflow and show you what that looks like. So in our rule manager, the little icon with the gear means it is already a business process. If we wanted to turn one of these into a business process, let's say our test workflow here, there's a little option here that says make this workflow a business process. Checking that box, it'll prompt for a login if you're not logged in already. And then it has the options of whether you can start this business process from a button in the client, as well as whether it displays business process information in the business process details panel of the document. So those kind of two are the user interface capabilities. And then there's also some more options about what the status shows up as, what the instance information is stored as. So that's all customizable. But there's a lot of options in there, but the simplest thing is just basically two checkboxes to make it so that you can start that workflow directly from a button in the client.
Can you show that client, by the way? Just show where it pops up, just so everybody can see that beyond that. Just to see, so you can see exactly where it starts for users when they, it's just Evan, or Justin. So if you go up there to those toolbar buttons, that's really where the business process starts. So it's a lot of people call that an ad hoc workflow, where they're going to launch one at this very moment. I want to start this, as opposed to how workflows normally run in Laserfiche is when criteria is met, Laserfiche automatically kicks off the workflow and launches it. When a document's in a folder and it has this metadata or this happens, it launches it. But ad hoc is nice because you can just go ahead and launch that and run a business process right then and there.
And we can just drag the business processes to the toolbar, any toolbar really, anywhere on there you want to add them to.
And you can change the icon as well.
Yeah, you can change the image, so we can have a little smiley face for our business process. It's a happy business process. And we could have it show the text next to that as well, so that if somebody's new and isn't familiar with what the buttons do, you can have all the text showing up next to it.
You can also launch those from the right-click menu too. So if you have a document you wanted to launch, you go right there and click on More, and from here you choose your business process and just click Start.
And the context menu will show you business processes that you've used recently in this list.
Any other open forum questions?
Following up with the business processes, is there a way to prompt for more information from the user, or would that kind of fall later in the workflow?
Workflow doesn't really have too much of a kind of prompting system for the users. The closest that generally we use is the business process details, which if a business process has run on a document, or if it's in an active business process, this will automatically show up unless the users have already turned that off.
The records management, if you want. If you go up to the top there under the, yep. And then, I'll just go down to the 002 records. And then click on the human resource. There you go. Perfect.
So a document that has had a business process run on it will show us information, and if it's mid-process, you'll have one item lined in here called instructions that you can type in instructions that tell the user what they need to do. So you might have a little paragraph saying, oh, you can please change this metadata field to be approved or denied, and digitally sign the document.
So like one instance that I'm thinking of is someone submits an application, and I want to apply them to multiple waiting lists because they applied for multiple. And so maybe do a metadata that say these are the things they applied for, and then when I run the business process, it could read those and process each one.
Yeah, so the question is being able to use metadata for, or populating like a multi-value field with the things that have been either assigned or registered for. You can certainly use workflow to look at each of those values on that document and perform a different task for each of those, or the same task repeatedly. It's all kind of just how we design that workflow. But it is capable of doing that, reading multi-value fields.
How many of you are going to go to the Laserfiche conference? You hear me talk about it all year round. Okay, 2, 3. Anybody want to go to the Laserfiche conference? I'll bet you're going. Somebody over there. Okay, excellent. There's more. This is just open forum, so I decided I'd use this to mention it's moved this year. So in case you didn't get the email, you didn't hear about it yet, it's moved. It's in Long Beach this year instead of Anaheim. But good news is if you still want to go to Disneyland in your free time, it's not that far away. But it's going to be in Long Beach, right near the Laserfiche corporate headquarters. But it's going to be down on the marina. So pretty cool. It's right where they run the Indy Formula One Long Beach race. Yes? Yeah, absolutely. Let me come back to that. Let me circle back. So the conference is in Long Beach, and it's good to know that any organization that would like to go, please let us know, and you get at least one. You can go on a waiting list for more, but at least one conference attendance at the Laserfiche annual event, no charge. So it's up to $900 in value. Just let us know, and we'll get you registered if you'd like to go. And then if there's additional tickets available, you'll go on a waiting list, and then we'll, for free, we'll circulate them. But you can always sign up too and pay for it if you like. So it's going to be in Long Beach. Keep that in mind. 3 days of events, hands-on training, and then we have our company event where we take our clients out. Last year we went to a brewery, and we had food trucks, and I've got to get you that. Got to get you that truck. There you go. Get to that. What was that?
Said it was much fun.
Oh, it's good. Yeah, we had a blast. I love it. But anyway, so keep that in mind. That's in January if you'd like to go. But the location has changed to Long Beach, bigger facilities, really what that's about. Okay, so question, one of the open forum questions was configuring this with CRM. How do we do that? So a lot of our clients use a CRM or a contact management system or customer relationship management system like Microsoft CRM or Salesforce or a number of different CRM tracking systems. And a lot of the cities also have a 311 system that can be Microsoft Dynamics. I've seen that being somewhat popular. So the configuration we have is through Microsoft CRM is one in particular. I know that's the one you're asking about, Diane, back there. The configuration is really a tool set that is done on the server. And what we do is we connect the customer folders directly to the CRM. So let me just take over and I'll show really quick, just in case anybody wants to see how this all works. All right, so what we'll do is just connect to our CRM real quick. Actually, we'll do. All right, so I've got my information right here. Really what we want to show is how this works in the CRM, just to give everybody an overview on what this really means. And I am running through a kind of slower internet connection today, so it might take just a second to pull this up. So how this all comes together, what Diane's question is back there, is really how does this get configured? How does this tie together? And I won't show you any documents, obviously, but I'll mention that this is tied together. So this is my account in my CRM. And this could be the same thing for an accounting system, or again, if you're using a CRM of some type, this is how this will be tied together. And you can see right here, the specific name and the standard folder structure that's automatically generated, my web access, that's embedded inside my CRM, where I track all of our customer data. So for us, Laserfiche is just an extension of our central tracking system that we use. And how that's all connected together is through a unique customer ID. And I may or may not be able to show that really quick. So let's see. Just pull that up and I'll show you. Show that real quick here. It's kind of neat. What we do is take a what's called a unique GUID or GUID, which is a unique value for, in this case, a customer. And when I want to see that exact customer's documents, Laserfiche will go through web access and say, find this exact customer's documents and display them in that nice folder tree all inside the CRM. So the configuration, if I can pop this open fast enough, show you that real quick here. All right. So what you'll see right here is this is the unique CRM identity. So to answer that question, how the CRM gets configured on the back end is we tell Laserfiche to store the unique ID for the CRM in a template field. So this is uniquely as far as the CRM is concerned, this says Oregon State Lottery. It's really what that unique ID is. And we tell Laserfiche or we tell the CRM to push that information into a template field for us and store it there. And that's all in the configuration wizard that we have on the back end.
the CRM will, the question is, does the CRM pass it, and the CRM does pass that to Laserfiche. Yep. All right, any other questions?
Can you go back, it's a CRM basically viewer, right, of documents that are in there?
No, that's the viewer that we were looking at is actually Microsoft CRM, and then embedded inside is web access. So this is Laserfiche web access that's embedded inside there. So it's iframed inside of the Microsoft CRM interface. And this works, by the way, for any of our other customers out there. This works for Salesforce, Microsoft CRM, Tamarack, Salentica, Redtail. And there's a whole bunch of other CRMs out there that do the same thing. All right, any other questions? Other open, I'm sorry, yes, go ahead, Rich.
I've been asked by a couple of departments regarding digital signatures.
Digital signatures.
How that would work. You need a pad that makes a sign, a pad, a document. Yeah, I know you provide signatures.
Yes, digital signatures. Yeah, absolutely. There's actually 3 different options, and I have a couple of great PowerPoints I can send you that we've done in the past. Let's start with the first most obvious one, the one you mentioned. So digital signature pads, a lot like what you would use in the grocery store or at the gas station. We have that integration available, and you just plug the digital signature pad right into the PC that would be signing, and the signature shows up live right on the screen. So you'll see the person signing as they're touching the pad. And that works with the Interlink signature pads, and it also works with the Topaz signature pads. So there's a couple of different manufacturers, but the integration part is just a plug into that local PC. So that's the first method, and that's been used in quite a few different scenarios. One of the ones that's probably most applicable for you is one of the Washington counties uses that in the jail. So the defendant will actually sign once the judge, actually the judge will sign once they agree to whatever they're going to do, they make their decision. And I don't work in a courtroom, so I know someone out there is going to say that doesn't sound right. Anyway, the judge makes a signature, then that routes to the defendant who's actually in jail, and then signs, or in the holding area, and signs. So that's kind of an interesting setup. The second method, if you're interested in looking more into digital signatures, is using DocuSign. So DocuSign is really, the big name in digital signatures right now. They're based out of Seattle, which is really cool. That's all integrated so that you can send a document, a contract that you have in Laserfiche directly out through the DocuSign infrastructure, their website. It goes out through their authentication, and then someone can just log into DocuSign. It's free. They just put an app on their phone or their tablet, and they can sign right there, or even through the website, and then it routes right back to you in Laserfiche once it's done. So that's the second method, and the third method is right through Laserfiche Forms. So the digital signature area in Laserfiche Forms is always an option. In fact, probably look at that real quick. So you would have an option like this. Make sure I'm showing my screen now. And all that just loads there real quick. Log in again. So Laserfiche Forms, of course, we've been talking about that quite a bit this morning. That's, again, a prerequisite of Laserfiche Avante or Rio. So you got to have one of those two, and I'm sure everybody's tired of hearing me say that. But that's a requirement there. Just going to show you that digital signature piece here. So if I decided I did want to sign one of my forms, this is in my inbox. I can type my signature right there, and I could choose the style that I'd like. Or I can save my standard signature, my actual official signature. I can save it on the Laserfiche server, and it will authenticate me as a Windows user and then allow that signature to be stamped on here. Or I can draw it. And so this will work from a mouse. This will work from an iPad or a stylus or your finger on a phone. And then you just click sign. And there's my signature. You put a date on it. I'll just click approve. So there's your three ways for digital signature. Any questions about that? Yes?
Does a signature pad form?
Does it what?
Does it work with forms like a signature pad, like if you're, have somebody, a customer or something signing, does that go on the form?
You know what? We've actually tested that, and it does work. We don't have an integration packaged ready yet for that. So it's kind of combining the first option with the third option. So you would have a digital signature pad to do this as opposed to on the screen. But it does work. So I couldn't send you anything today, but it is an option. Any other questions? Open forum questions? Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
I know I'm bringing it back to that question. So I think I've got it, but I just want to make sure. Can you go back to that screen in CRM? I know it's the OSL one. So for example, we have 5,000 retailers. When you are in that account, will Laserfiche already sort it so we only see the documents related to that one retailer? Or do we have to search still in that window for that specific retailer's documents?
No, you'd be able to.
Would it automatically open up, like, say it's the Lions Club, and it will show that specific retailer, just those documents for that Lions Club?
Yes.
Or Bob's Bar and Grill, or
Yeah, the question
whatever
is.
account we have up, will only show those documents in Laserfiche for that account?
Yes, the question is, will this area right here only show the documents for the corresponding account? And that's correct. It knows what you're looking at in the CRM, so it's only going to display what you've requested to be seen. However, if you're a user that prefers to see everything together, so you might say, I'm going in and out of all these different client files all the time, you can always go directly to Laserfiche and you can see all of the clients or account paperwork. But it will automatically take you where it needs to be.
Got a question over here.
Excellent.
Dolores wants to know what authentication is there to the digital signature in Laserfiche forms? How can you verify that is the client or customer's signature in actuality?
That's a good question. So the authentication, and Dolores, thank you for the question. What authentication options do we have? Well, there are a couple of ways that we can do this. There is, to answer your question, there's no authentication regarding like a card or anything. You know, you can carry around like a keyboard card, I forget what you call that, authentication card.
Smart card.
Smart card, thank you, Bryce. Smart card. So you could have that, and that authenticates you to the PC, and then you'd be able to sign with your authentication as a Windows user. That's one method for authentication if you are on that PC. Another method would be to have a value, a variable value that tells you that that user is that particular, or that person is that particular person. And then you get the dual factor authentication. So email address and maybe the last 4 digits of their social, or email address and the last 4 digits of their account, or something like that, where only that person would know. So they enter in 2 values, and that makes the signature available. Or a PCI, or a smart card rather, would be another option to the PC. Hopefully that answers your question, Dolores. Okay, other questions? Open forum. Anything else? Anything else on it? Anybody else have any other questions? All right. Well, we've almost hit the end of our time. We're going to have lunch here in Salem and pick up on the workshop after this. And just to show everybody what is on the agenda for the workshop, I'm just going to put that up on the screen here. I can find all my items on my desktop. So our workshop is going to be kind of a review of what is ECM. We're going to go through automating contract management, day in the life of a small business. So that's really, what does Cities Digital do? How do we leverage Laserfiche? You know, tips from the experts. 5 ways to improve scanning, and then we'll be going through the Laserfiche connector. We'll be going deep into that, as well as beer and wine tasting. I'm sorry, all those of you out there on the internet, you've got to come to the user groups. But anyway, thank you everyone for coming to the user group. I think it's worth mentioning to everybody who's joining us through simulcast and everybody who's here. The reason we're doing these is because people are asking for these user groups. So if you show up or you attend on the simulcast, that's great. I mean, we really appreciate that. We're happy to do this. And it's great to see everybody and get some kind of live interaction. And it forces us to come up with new content to show you every single time. So every month we have new things to try to share. If you have ideas, or if you want to be more involved with this, send us your thoughts. Let us know what you'd like to see in the next user group. We're happy to go and really dive deep into certain subjects. We got a lot about security, so we focused a lot on security today. We'll be showing the GIS integration, I think, next month. We just don't have all the pieces in place right now, but that is coming. So ArcGIS integration, you'll be able to see that soon. Good thing to keep in mind, we do have a user group already scheduled for next month. So there will be a user group in simulcast from Los Angeles next month. So we're just working our way down the western coast. So we went Seattle, we're in Salem, we'll be in Los Angeles. And then the month after that, we'll be in northern Wisconsin. So broadcasting from Wausau, Wisconsin. And then after that, we'll be in Austin. So anyway, every month you should see these. Please sign up if you're interested. And you know, we really appreciate everybody's involvement and questions today. So many good questions. So with that, we'll take a break here and we'll have dinner or lunch brought in. And thank you everybody on the simulcast for attending today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.